I made this. I managed to make all of this completely on my own. The environment, the assets, the animations, the UI, the audio, the logic, and the gameplay itself. I started by creating the basic flying movement. At first, I followed a few tutorials to get something working, but the movement didn't feel the way I wanted it to. So instead of trying to patch it, I scrapped the whole thing and rebuilt it from scratch. After that, I couldn't really continue working on the game because I got sick and also had math exams to deal with. Now that the exams were out of the way, I stopped feeling sick and regained the motivation to work on the game again. The first thing I did was make the speed depend on the angle you look at. So now if you look down, you win speed, and if you look up, you start losing it. But the code quickly became messy, so let me clean that up. After that, I added the dash ability, which simply increases your velocity when you click the right mouse button. Then I tried adjusting the FOV while the player is dashing to create a zoom out effect. At first, I implemented it directly inside the movement component. But unfortunately, that component doesn't support the timeline node. I tried doing it without a timeline, but it felt terrible. So instead, I created a blueprint interface with the timeline inside the player blueprint and fixed the system properly. Once that was working, I also made the FOV dynamically adjust based on the current speed, which made the movement feel a lot more polished. After that, I spent a few days making small tweaks to the movement and improving what I already had. Once it felt good enough for me, I added a speed meter and a simple function that checks if the player is flying near an obstacle, which will play an important role in the near future. Now that the basics were done, I started prototyping the combo mechanics. I started with the ground run combo. I adjusted some values like how long the player runs on the ground before being launched and how far they are going to be launched. Surprisingly, it was very easy to implement and it ended up becoming the best mechanic in the whole game. Once that was done, I decided to quickly make a fish model in Blender so I could get a better feeling of how the final game might be like. Modeling, rigging, and animating it were mostly easy, since I had been improving a lot with Blender. But then I ran into an issue with importing the textures into the engine. Eventually, I figured out that you simply need to export and save the painted textures into a folder before importing them. After fixing that, I implemented the second mechanic of the game, the speed multiplier, for short, SN. Whenever you perform a ground run, you gain an additional 0.25 speed multiplier, but the moment you stop moving, the multiplier resets back to 1. Once the SM system was working properly, I added a simple oxygen meter that slowly decreases over time. Just as development was going smoothly, I had 2 more exams, so I stopped working on the game for 3 days and focused on studying. After that was done, I started implementing feathers which are used to perform dashes. First, I made an icon for them in my totally legal copy of Photoshop. Then I imported them into a widget. Doing combos regenerates your feathers while dashing consumes them. Then I added a sample wind count and built a small test level to see how the game will feel when played in tighter spaces. Next, I started working on the water system. Using the physics volume that UF5 provides wasn't working well for me, and it kept breaking, so I decided to take a break from it and instead built a checkpoint system which ended up taking around 30 minutes. Once the checkpoints were working, I spent the entire day improving and polishing the movement mechanics. Now that I had taken a break from the water system, it was time to go back and fix it. Instead of using the physics volume, I used the box collision. When the player enters it, the movement values change to simulate swimming. I also made the water absorb your speed when you enter it, and when you exit the water, it launches the player. After finishing the water system, I started working on destructible walls. At first, it was easy, but when I reached the part where the player actually needs to break the wall by hitting it, I got completely stuck. It took an entire day of reading documentations and experiment to finally figure it out. And even then, the system still needs a lot of work. Constantly fighting with the water and destructible systems started draining my motivation. So I decided to add another combo mechanic called the lift burst. Basically, if you are flying downward for long enough and then quickly pull the camera upwards, you get a vertical boost. And if you pull up just before hitting the ground, that boost becomes massively stronger. So I started implementing it. Surprisingly, it was very simple to build. I won't dive into the technical details because the video will become way too long and I already haven't uploaded anything for months, so I need to keep this short. After implementing the lift burst, I added toxic water. It drains your oxygen when you enter it, but flying close to its surface actually increases both your speed and your oxygen. This adds a risk and reward element to the gameplay. I spent most of the day building the main level. Nothing particularly interesting happened here, so here are some time lapse of the process. Now that the first half of the map was finished, I decided to integrate the state manager from an old project into this one. The reason for this was that while testing the map, I kept encountering a lot of state-related bugs, so I was in desperate need for a proper state manager. After integrating it, most of those bugs disappeared. But I still kept noticing smaller issues that were ruining the experience. The player was too small to see clearly, the lighting felt off, and the performance was terrible. So I started doing some minor optimizations, which eventually got the game running at around 38 FPS. Now you might think 38 FPS is bad, and yes it is. But considering that the default third-person template runs on my machine at around 20-30 FPS, I would say 38 is actually an improvement. Once I was satisfied with the performance, I started building the second half of the map. Day 25. This is when I actually started working on the art for the game. I was so excited about this phase that I spent the entire day researching, gathering references, experimenting in Blender, and trying to learn new techniques. By the end of the day, I had created a simple landscape material and some stylized grass, which absolutely destroyed my performance. Then I decided to turn this environment into an asset pack that I could reuse in future projects. So I spent another full day optimizing and refining the grass until I could fill an entire scene with it while barely affecting performance. But I still felt like I could do better. So I made some flowers but ended up scrapping them because I didn't like how they looked. After that, I built an auto landscape material but ended up scrapping that too, because it limited my ability to customize on it. At that point, the process basically became make something new, test it in game, and either keep it or scrap it. After all that experimenting, I decided to go to sleep and get some rest. The next day, when I opened the project, the engine immediately crashed. Fortunately, I managed to fix it by deleting the intermediate, saved, and config folders. Once everything was working again, I built a new auto landscape material that included everything I needed. The most logical next step was adding new flowers, so I did. At this point, it still needed optimization to bring the game back to around 30 FPS. Modeling, texturing, and optimizing foliage was taking me hours, mainly because I'm not nearly as comfortable with it as I'm with blueprints. Despite that, I kept going and made even more flowers. I modeled some cliffs and rocks and integrated them into the engine. Once the environment pack was nearly finished, I migrated it into the main project. I tested the materials in the map and the results turned out pretty decent. Then I disabled shadows from the directional light, which made the game look more better and improved performance significantly. After that, I packaged the game multiple times for testing and tweaked the movement values. I improved how the grass looked, reworked parts of the landscape, and modeled additional cliffs. I remodeled the fish, added sound effects, particles, visual effects, and performed a lot of optimizations. After all of that, the game went from looking like this to this. But we were still far from finished. So I started implementing tutorials and built a dedicated tutorial level to teach the basic mechanics. After finishing that, I began working on the main menu. It went from this to this in around 4 days. Then I created another game mode called Endless. It's basically an open level where you can freely perform tricks and experiment with the mechanics, but you first need to finish the main level in order to unlock it. Later, I converted the project to C++ in order to implement a loading screen. This part wasn't entirely my own work. I followed a quick tutorial to get it running. After that, I improved the endless mode map. At this stage of development, the engine started freezing and crashing constantly, which caused me to lose progress multiple times. But there wasn't much I could do about it. So I just kept working because the game was already very close to being finished. My routine basically became wake up, fix bugs, optimize set mechanics, improve the UI, and tweak movement values. After all of that is finished, I finally managed to have the game close to being finished. At the moment of writing the script, I still wouldn't consider the game completely finished. There is one final thing I still need to implement, but I've been delaying it for months now. That said, by the time you are watching this video, the game should finally be finished. You'll be able to find it on itch if you want to try it yourself, and let me know if there are any things you would like me to see built in the future.